The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such terror before. Ambassador Velthera stood at the center of the circular chamber, her crystalline body flickering with colors that spoke of pure fear. Around her, representatives from 47 different species watched in uncomfortable silence. Velthera's voice came out as musical tones, translated by the universal communicators into words that chilled every listener. Honored council members, my people are dying. 3 billion souls on Valonus Prime face extinction within 30 solar cycles. The Alterian representative, a being of pure energy named Kixara, pulsed with soft blue light. Ambassador, please explain the nature of this threat. The Valani have lived in peace for over 2,000 years. Peace, Velthera repeated, the word causing her crystal form to dim. Yes, we have known only peace. We have no weapons, no warriors, no understanding of violence. That is why we are helpless against them. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The images showed scenes that made several council members physically recoil. Massive insectoid creatures, each the size of a small building, moved across a once beautiful world. They devoured everything in their path, trees, buildings, and worse things that the council members tried not to think about. The Korthok swarm arrived without warning 6 months ago, Velthera continued. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply consume. Our cities, our forests, our people, everything becomes part of their biomass. Elder Zindar of the Ethereal Assembly floated forward, his ghostly form shimmering with concern. What methods have you attempted to stop them? Everything we know, Velthora replied, her harmonics growing more desperate. We tried to speak with them. We offered them our resources freely. We even tried to evacuate entire continents. Nothing works. They follow us everywhere. They adapt to every defense we create. She changed the holographic display to show tactical reports. The Zephyrian Defense Force sent their best shield generators. The swarm absorbed the energy and grew stronger. The Novarian Republic provided their most advanced pacification fields. The creatures became immune within hours. Councilmember Azerth of the Silicon Confederacy spoke up, his rocky form grinding as he moved. What about the Omega Defense Protocol? Surely orbital bombardment could thin their numbers. We cannot, Velthera said, her light growing even dimmer. Our people are still down there, millions of them, hiding in underground shelters. If we destroy the surface, we destroy them too. The chamber fell silent. This was the core problem that had kept the council paralyzed for months. Every species represented here had evolved beyond the need for physical violence. They solved problems through technology, diplomacy, and advanced energy manipulation. But the Korthok swarm was different. It was a force of pure biological destruction that answered only to hunger. Mentor Quinthal of the academic worlds cleared his throat. Perhaps we could create a biological weapon, something that targets their specific genetic structure, tried Velthera said flatly. They adapt faster than we can modify our creations. Every virus, every toxin, every genetic disruptor becomes useless within days. What about evacuation? Suggested another voice. We could move your entire population. 2 colony worlds. Where? Velthora asked. The swarm follows us. Every world we evacuate to becomes their next target. We tried this with the mining colonies on Valonus 3 and 4. Now those worlds are gone too. The frustration in the chamber was thick enough to cut. These were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were helpless against what amounted to very large, very hungry bugs. Admiral Vexkoth of the Defense Coalition spoke for the first time. His species had the closest thing to a military force that anyone in the council possessed. I hate to say this, but perhaps we need to consider more primitive solutions. Primitive? Several voices asked at once. Yes, Vexkoth said reluctantly. Violence. Direct physical combat. The kind of warfare our ancestors abandoned thousands of years ago. The suggestion caused an uproar. Energy beings flickered with distress. Crystal entities changed colors rapidly. Even the plant-based representatives rustled their leaves in agitation. We are civilized beings, protested Counselor Thylax of the Pure Thought Collective. We do not engage in barbarism. Then the Valani die, Vexkoth said bluntly. Because everything we have tried has failed. The swarm understands only one language, and we have forgotten how to speak it. Valthera stepped forward again, her crystalline form now barely glowing. Honored Council, I know what I am about to ask goes against everything we believe, but my people face extinction. If there is any species in the galaxy that still remembers warfare, still practices violence, we beg you to contact them. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone knew what she was asking. Somewhere in the galactic records were species that had not yet evolved beyond physical conflict. Worlds that were still dangerous, still violent, still primitive enough to fight with weapons instead of words. Kixera pulsed nervously. There are some species that still engage in territorial disputes. Krathri have been known to use physical force in their mining operations. Not enough, Vexkoth said. We need warriors. Real warriors. Species that have made warfare into an art form. Elder Zindar spoke up hesitantly. There is one possibility. Species from the Outer Rim. They were discovered recently, but their world is classified as... He paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. Classified as what? Velthora asked desperately. Class 12 Deathworld, Zindar finished quietly. The reaction was immediate. Several council members made sounds of disgust. Others simply stared in horror. Deathworld, Councillor Thylex asked. As in a planet that actively tries to kill its inhabitants? Yes, Zindar confirmed. Weather patterns that can destroy continents. Predatory life forms that hunt in packs. Geological instability that changes the landscape daily. And somehow, intelligent life evolved there. They call themselves humans. Humans, Valthera repeated. Do they have weapons? Do they know how to fight? Zindar checked his records. According to our surveys, they are currently engaged in minor territorial conflicts on 17 different continents. They possess chemical explosives, projectile weapons, and combat vehicles. But more importantly, they seem to actually enjoy fighting. Enjoy it? Several voices asked in horror. They have something called sports, where they simulate combat for entertainment. They create fictional stories about warfare, even have organized competitions where they hurt each other. For fun, the chamber erupted in disgusted chatter. The idea of finding violence entertaining was beyond comprehension for most of the assembled species. But Velthora stepped forward, her crystalline form suddenly brightening with hope. Contact them. Please. Ask them to help us. Ambassador. Kixara said gently, These are primitive beings from a death world. They might send a few dozen warriors with basic weapons. It may not be enough. It is more than we have now, Valthera replied. And if they truly understand violence, perhaps they can teach us what we need to know. The vote was close, but desperation won out over revulsion. The Galactic Council would contact Earth and request military assistance against the Korthok swarm. None of them had any idea what they were about to unleash upon the galaxy. The message from space arrived on a Tuesday morning at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters in Seoul. General Kong Min-ho was drinking his third cup of coffee when his aide, Lieutenant Park Ji-won, burst through his office door. Sir, you need to see this immediately, Park Ji-won said, her face pale with excitement and disbelief. Kong Min-ho looked up from his tactical reports. At 55 years old, he had seen enough strange things during his military career to remain calm. The Mars Rebellion, the asteroid mining wars, the conflict with the Europa separatists. But nothing had prepared him for what appeared on his screen. The holographic display showed a being made of living crystal speaking in musical tones. The translation software worked overtime to convert the alien language into Korean, then English, then back to Korean as different linguists tried to make sense of it. This is Ambassador Valthora of the Volani Republic, the crystal being said. We are reaching out to your species because our records indicate you still practice warfare. Need warriors. Our world is dying. Colonel Lee Hyok entered the room as the message continued. He was younger than Kong Min-ho, but had twice as much combat experience. The scar across his left cheek told stories of the underground fighting on Titan. Are we really looking at an alien asking us for military help? Lee Hyok asked. We? Listening. Kong Minho replied. The alien explained about the Korthok swarm. She showed images of insect creatures, the size of buildings consuming entire cities. She talked about 3 billion people facing extinction. She mentioned that 47 advanced alien civilizations had tried to help and failed. We have contacted your Galactic Council, Velthera continued. They suggested we reach out to species that still understand violence. Your world is classified as what they call a death world. We hope this means you can fight. The message ended with coordinates and a desperate plea. We can offer you advanced technology, rare minerals, anything you desire. We just need perhaps 50 warriors with your most advanced weapons. Please help us. The room fell silent. Park Ji-won stared at the screen. Lee Hyok scratched his scar. Kong Minho finished his coffee. 50 warriors, Lee Hyok said finally, with our most advanced weapons, Park Ji-won added. Against planet-eating space bugs, Kong Minho concluded. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Kong Minho started laughing. It began as a small chuckle, but grew until he was holding his sides. Sir? Park Ji-won asked nervously. They think we are primitive, Kong Minho said between laughs. They think we will send 50 people with rifles. Lee Hyok began to understand. A slow grin spread across his face. Sir? Are you thinking what I think you are thinking? Get me Admiral Song Moran from the Fleet Command, Kong Minho ordered. And Colonel Kim Taeyeon from the Marines. Also Dr. Han Sora from Alien Studies. We have work to do. Then 6 hours. Every major military leader on Earth was gathered in the Seoul Command Center. The holographic display now showed detailed scans of the Volani home system. The Korthok swarm was indeed massive, but humans had fought worse odds before. Admiral Song Moran was the first to speak. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her blue eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had commanded fleets in 3 major conflicts. The alien message suggests they expect a small force, she said. 50 soldiers with basic weapons. They have no idea what human military capability looks like. Colonel Kim Taeyeon nodded. He was built like a tank and had the personality too. Match. His Marines had earned their reputation in the worst fighting the solar system had to offer. The way I see it, Kim Taeyeon said, we have 2 choices. Send what they expect and probably fail, or send what they need and probably succeed. Looked at Han Sora looked up from her alien physiology reports. She was younger than the others, but had spent years studying alien biology from long-range scans. Korthok creatures are fascinating, she said. They appear to be a hive mind species that adapts through rapid biological evolution. But they have never encountered anything like human warfare tactics. Explain, Kong, Minho ordered. Every species that has fought them used energy weapons, defensive shields, and predictable military formations. Han Sora continued. Humans fight. Differently, we use explosives, chemical weapons, biological warfare, psychological tactics, and pure stubborn creativity. Major Choi Moran entered the room carrying a thick folder. She specialized in xenobiology warfare and had been studying the alien data for hours. The swarm adapts to threats, she reported. But they adapt to the threats they understand. Energy weapons they absorb. Defensive barriers they overcome. But they have never seen kinetic weapons, explosive demolition, or coordinated infantry. Tactics. Captain Yoon Seok-jin spoke up from the back of the room. His Special Forces unit had earned their reputation in environments that would kill most humans within minutes. Sir, if I may, Yoon Seok-jin said. These aliens think Deathworld means we are tough. They have no idea that Deathworld means we are creative killers who turn survival into an art form. The room erupted in discussion. Ideas flew back and forth as the greatest military minds on Earth began to plan something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Song Moran stood up. I propose we send the first expeditionary fleet. 200 ships. 50,000 Marines, full orbital support, and everything we learned from fighting in hostile environments. That seems excessive for bugs, someone commented. No, Kang, Minho said firmly. That seems like the minimum we need to save 3 billion innocent people. Planning session continued for 18 hours. By the end, they had designed a military response that would shock the galaxy. This would not be 50 warriors with rifles. This would be humanity unleashed. Meanwhile, the alien observers who had been assigned to monitor Earth's response watched in growing amazement. Commander Nelith of the Villani had expected a simple reply, accepting or declining their request. Instead, she observed massive mobilization across the entire planet. Ships launched from dozens of spaceports. Factories began producing weapons. At incredible speed, military units from every continent began moving toward assembly points. "Carvin," she called to her partner, "are you seeing this?" Carvin adjusted their translation equipment. The humans appeared to be mobilizing their entire military force. This cannot be their response to our request. "I think it is," Nelith replied quietly. They watched as the human fleet assembled in Earth orbit. The ships were different from anything in the Galactic database. Instead of elegant curves and energy fields, these vessels looked like flying fortresses bristling with weapons. General Kung Minho's final transmission to the Galactic Council was short and direct. "We received your request for military assistance," he said, looking directly into the camera. 50 warriors seemed insufficient for the task. We are sending the first expeditionary fleet instead. 3 billion lives deserve our full attention. The transmission ended. Within 48 hours of receiving the alien plea for help, humanity had assembled the largest military force in its history. It was preparing to leave the solar system. The Galactic Council had asked Earth to send warriors. They were about to discover that when humans went to war, they did not send warriors. They sent everything. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system like a storm made of metal and fire. Admiral Song Moran stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, watching the tactical displays with the calm eyes of someone who had seen war before. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Shin Wubin from the sensor station, "we have visual confirmation of the target world." The main screen showed Valonus Prime, and it was worse than the reports had suggested. Half the planet's surface was covered in a writhing black mass that moved like living oil. Korthok's swarm had consumed entire continents, leaving behind only their own twisted biological structures. "Dear God," whispered Commander Baejimin, the fleet's intelligence officer.
"Oh,
"There must be billions of them." "Then we kill billions of them," Admiral Song Moran replied simply. On the observation deck, the alien representatives from the Galactic Council watched the human fleet with growing amazement and horror. Admiral Vexkoth, of the Alterian Collective, had seen many military forces, but nothing like this. "Scholar Zindar," he said to his companion, "how many ships did they send?" Scholar Zindar checked his instruments. 212 vessels, 53,000 personnel, and those weapon signatures. ... double quotes, he paused, looking disturbed. "I have never seen anything like them." Below them in the Marine Bay, Colonel Kim Tae-yoon addressed his forces. The man was built like a mountain and had a voice that could be heard over artillery fire. "Marines," he began, "we have 3 billion innocent people counting on us. The enemy does not negotiate. They do not retreat. They do not surrender. They only consume." The Marines listened with the focused attention of professional killers. These were men and women who had fought in the asteroid fields, in the ice caves of Europa, in the poisonous swamps of Titan. They were humanity's best, and they knew it. "The aliens think we are primitive," Kim Tae-yeon continued. They think Deathworld means we are tough. They are about to learn that Deathworld means we are survivors, and survivors do whatever it takes to win." The Marines responded with a roar. That shook the ship. Even the alien observers could feel the vibration through the deck plates. Lieutenant Imuna checked her equipment one final time. She commanded 3rd Platoon, 2nd Company, and had earned her position by being the best. At what humans did better than anyone else in the galaxy: adapt and overcome. "Listen up," she told her squad. "Intelligence says these bugs evolve fast. They adapt to energy weapons, defensive barriers, and predictable tactics. Good thing we brought none of those." Her Marines laughed. They carried explosive charges, flamethrowers, chemical weapons, and pure human creativity. The Korthak swarm was about to get an education in Deathworld warfare. The first engagement began when the swarm sent a probe force to investigate the human fleet. 1,000 insectoid creatures, each the size of a small building, launched themselves through space toward the human ships. Interesting, observed Major Choi Moran from the science deck. They appear to be adapted for void warfare. Probably. Absorb the technology from previous victims. Can they hurt us? Asked Admiral Song Moran. Unknown, but we are about to find out. The swarm creatures moved fast, using some kind of biological propulsion system. They had acid weapons, razor-sharp claws, and armor that seemed to shift and adapt as the humans watched. All ships, Admiral Song Moran ordered, weapons free. Show them what Deathworld engineering looks like. The human fleet opened fire, and the galaxy learned something new about warfare. Instead of elegant energy beams, the humans used kinetic weapons. Massive metal slugs moving at incredible speed. Chemical explosives that turned space into fields of fire. Missile swarms that hunted their targets like living things. The Korthak probe force lasted exactly 47 seconds. Target destroyed, reported Lieutenant Shin Wubin. Complete elimination. Scholar Zindar stared at his instruments in disbelief. They destroyed 1,000 evolved void fighters in under a minute. How is that possible? Because said Dr. Han Sora, who had joined the aliens on the observation deck, those creatures were adapted to fight civilized enemies. We are not civilized. We are survivors. The real battle began when the fleet reached orbit around Velonis Prime. The swarm had noticed them now, and millions of creatures began launching themselves from the planet's surface. Admiral, reported Commander Bei Jimin, swarm forces rising from 17 different hive clusters. Estimated numbers, ... He paused, checking his instruments again. Over 10 million individual hostiles. Excellent, Admiral Song Moran replied. Target-rich environment. All ships begin orbital bombardment. Marines, prepare for surface deployment. The human fleet unleashed hell upon the swarm, not the clean. Precise destruction of energy weapons, but the brutal effectiveness of kinetic bombardment. Massive shells fell from orbit like metal rain, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city block. But the swarm was learning. The creatures began to adapt, developing harder armor, better reflexes, improved coordination. Within hours, they were taking less damage from the same weapons. They're evolving, reported Major Choi Moran. Adaptation rate is incredible. At this pace, they will be immune to our orbital weapons within days. Then we go down there and kill them up close. Colonel Kim Taeyeon said over the comm. Marines prepare for planetary assault. The first wave of human Marines hit the planet, like a hammer blow. But instead of the traditional landing zones that every other species would have used, they did something the swarm could not predict, Captain. Yoon Seok-jin led his Special Forces unit directly into the heart of the largest hive cluster. Using stealth technology, explosive charges, tactics that no civilized species would consider, they struck at the swarm's command structure. Seok-jin to base, his voice crackled over the radio. We are inside the primary hive. These things. I've never seen close quarters combat before. They do not know how to fight in their own tunnels. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Imuna discovered something interesting about Korthak biology. When her squad used flamethrowers on a group of warriors, the creatures did not just die, they panicked. Base, this is Yuna, she reported. The bugs are afraid of fire, not adapted to it, actually afraid. They are running away. Confirmed, added Sergeant Ko Sunmi from another position. Chemical weapons are causing complete breakdown in their formations. They have no defense against fear. The revelation spread through the human forces like wildfire. The Korthak swarm, for all their adaptability, had never encountered psychological warfare. They were a hive mind adapted to consume and evolve, but they had no experience with terror, panic, or the kind of creative brutality that humans specialized in. Private Song Kun-ko made the discovery that changed everything. During a lull in the fighting, he started singing an old song from his childhood. The Korthak creatures around him began to act strangely, their coordination breaking down. Command, he reported excitedly. Human singing is disrupting their communication. Somehow, the frequency is interfering with their hive mind connection. Within minutes, every human on the planet was singing. Battle songs, folk songs, pop music, anything with rhythm and melody. The effect was devastating. The swarm began to fragment, individual creatures losing contact with their collective intelligence. Scholar Zindar watched the tactical displays in amazement. They are not just fighting the swarm, he told Admiral Vexkoth. They are psychological warfare artists. They're turning the enemy's greatest strength against them. What strength? Vexkoth asked. Unity. The swarm's power comes from perfect coordination. The humans are teaching them chaos. Back on Earth's moon, General Kong Minho received the first battle reports. The human forces had been on Vilonis. It's primed for 6 hours and had already achieved more than 47 advanced civilizations had managed in months. Sir, reported his aide, casualty reports are coming in. Kong Minho tensed. How bad? 17 wounded. No fatalities. The enemy appears to be completely unprepared for human tactics. Kong Minho nodded. It was exactly what he had expected. The galaxy had sent energy weapons and defensive barriers against a biological threat. Humanity had sent explosives, fire, poison, and psychological warfare. The Korthok swarm had evolved to fight civilized enemies. They were about to learn why Deathworld meant something very different to the species that had survived there. 3 weeks into the war, Major Choi Moran had turned a crashed Villani research station into something that would have horrified every civilized species in the galaxy. Her field laboratory contained dozens of captured Korthok specimens, each one studied with the cold efficiency that only a Deathworld species could manage. The fascinating thing about these creatures, she explained to the horrified council observers, is that they evolve predictably. They encounter a threat. They adapt to it. They move on. It is very efficient. Scholar Zindar floated nervously near the examination table where a live Korthok warrior was restrained. The creature was the size of a small car, covered in armor. That shifted colors as it tried to adapt to the bright lights. Is it not dangerous to keep live specimens? Zindar asked. Everything is dangerous, Major Choi Moran replied, not looking up from her instruments. The difference is that humans learn to make danger work for us instead of against us. She gestured to her research data. This warrior has adapted to energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and chemical attacks. But watch what happens when I introduce something new. She played a recording of human laughter. The Korthok creature immediately began writhing in distress, its armor shifting through dozens of different configurations as it tried to adapt to something it could not understand. Psychological warfare, Major Choi Moran explained. They can adapt to physical threats because they understand them. But they cannot adapt to concepts like humor, fear, or creativity because those things require individual thought. Meanwhile, Captain Yoon Seok-jin and his Special Forces team were deep inside the swarm's primary hive ship. The massive vessel was alive, its walls pulsing with organic circuits and veins. But instead of being disgusted, like any civilized species, would be the humans treated it as just another hostile environment to conquer. Team 2, report, Yoon Seok-jin whispered into his radio. We have reached the neural cluster, came the reply from Sergeant E. Muna. This place is like a giant brain. It is having a very bad day. The humans had been using a tactic that no other species had ever considered. Instead of trying to destroy the hive ship from outside, they had infiltrated it and were destroying it from within, using explosives, chemical weapons, and pure human stubbornness. They were giving the collective intelligence a severe headache. Remember Yoon Seok-jin told his team, we are not just fighting bugs, we're fighting a computer, made of meat, and every computer has weaknesses. He placed another explosive charge against what looked like a major nerve bundle. The entire ship shuddered as the blast severed connections that had taken the swarm. Years to grow. Back on the planet's surface, the war had taken on a character that amazed the alien observers. Lieutenant Shin Woo-bin had discovered that the Korthok creatures could not handle chaos. Every time they started to coordinate their attacks, the humans would do something completely unpredictable. Watch this, he told Commander Nelith, who had volunteered to observe human tactics up close. The bugs are setting up a standard flanking maneuver. Any civilized military would respond with defensive positions and coordinated fire. Instead, Shin Wubin ordered his platoon to do something that made Nelith's crystalline form flicker with confusion. Half the squad began singing children's songs while the other half started a food fight with their emergency rations. The approaching Korthok warriors stopped dead in their tracks. Their hive mind simply could not process what it was seeing. While they stood there trying to adapt to singing and food throwing, the humans calmly walked up and eliminated them with flamethrowers. "I do not understand," Nelith said weakly. "How is chaos a military tactic?" Because Shin Wubin explained, chaos is the one thing that a hive mind cannot predict or adapt to. They expect logic. We give them madness. They expect patterns. We give them randomness. The breakthrough came when Private Song Kung Ho made his second important discovery. While exploring a damaged hive cluster, he found something that changed the entire nature of the war. "Command," he reported over the radio, "I found something weird. There are Korthok creatures down here that are not fighting. They look scared. Major." Choi Moran arrived within the hour to investigate. What she found challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about the swarm. "These are not warriors," she reported to Admiral Song Moran. "These are what we would call civilians. Workers, maybe even children. The swarm is not just a military force. It is an entire civilization." The implications hit the human command structure like a thunderbolt. They were not fighting an invasion force. They were fighting a species that had turned its entire civilization into a weapon of consumption. "Sir," Private Song Kyun Ho said hesitantly, "some of these smaller ones are trying to communicate. They keep making sounds that the translator is picking up as Help Us Dr. Hansora arrived to study the situation personally. As the fleet's expert on alien psychology, she had been trying to understand the swarm's behavior patterns. This changes everything," she announced, after examining the captured civilians. "The swarm is not evil. It is desperate. They have been consuming worlds because they cannot stop. Their biology forces them to grow and expand or die. So they are victims too," asked Admiral Song Moran. "In a way, yes. But that does not make them less dangerous. A virus is not evil either, but you still have to stop it from killing people." The human forces adapted to this new information with the flexibility that only a Deathworld species could manage. Instead of simply destroying everything, they began selective targeting. Warriors were eliminated. Civilians were captured and studied. Sergeant Ko Sunmi led a rescue operation that would have been impossible for any other species. Her demolitions expertise allowed her to collapse specific sections of hive clusters, separating the military castes from the civilian populations. "The beautiful thing about explosives," she explained to the amazed alien observers, "is that they can be precise or destructive depending on how you use them. Deathworld engineering at its finest." But the real change came when the humans started talking to their prisoners. Unlike every other species that had fought the swarm, humans had experience with negotiation under extreme circumstances. Colonel Kim Taeyeon sat across from a captured Korthok queen in what had to be the strangest prisoner interrogation in Galactic history. The queen was the size of a small building, with enough biological weapons to level a city. Kim Taeyeon was a normal human with a cup of coffee and a patient expression. "Tell me about your people," he said simply. The queen's response, filtered through translation equipment, was a mix of confusion and desperation. "We consume, we grow. We must grow, or we die. It is what we are. But why must you grow?" Kim Taeyeon asked. "What happens if you stop?" "We starve. We weaken. We fall apart. The hunger never ends." Kim Taeyeon nodded as if this made perfect sense. Growing up on a death world had taught humans that desperation made people do terrible things. But it also taught them that desperation could be cured. "What if I told you there was another way?" he asked. "What if you could grow without consuming other people's worlds?" The queen's massive form went very still. "Impossible. We've tried. Always we return to consumption." "You have tried with civilized species," Kim Tae-yeon pointed out. We are not civilized. We are survivors. And survivors always find another way. Meanwhile, the war continued to rage across the system. But for the first time since the swarm had begun its expansion, they were not winning. Human tactics had introduced something into their calculations that they could not adapt to quickly enough. Unpredictability, creativity, the willingness to try things that made no logical sense but worked anyway. Council observer Mentor Quinthal sent a report back to the Galactic Assembly that would be studied for generations. The humans do not just fight the swarm, he wrote. They are teaching it to be afraid. They are introducing concepts like uncertainty, individual thought, and choice into a collective consciousness that has never experienced such things. The result is not just military victory. It is evolution through trauma. The swarm is being forced to become something new, something that can think beyond mere consumption. I am beginning to understand what Deathworld truly means. It does not mean a place that kills its inhabitants. It means a place that teaches its inhabitants to transform death into life, destruction into creation, desperation into hope. We asked them to send warriors, they sent teachers. And they are teaching the galaxy lessons we never knew we needed to learn. The final battle took place inside the Korthok Broodmother. It's a living ship the size of a small moon that served as the heart of the entire swarm. General Kang Min-ho had arrived from Earth to personally oversee the operation. Bring in with him Master Sergeant Ko Sunmei, whose reputation for explosive solutions had become legendary throughout the fleet. Sir, reported Colonel Kim Tae-yeon as they prepared for the assault. Intelligence indicates the Queen Mother is at the center of this vessel. She controls the entire swarm consciousness. If we can reach her, we end this war. Kang Min-ho. Finished. One way or another. The interior of the Broodmother was like traveling through the bloodstream of some impossible creature. Walls pulsed with organic rhythm. The air itself seemed alive. Acid dripped from ceiling organs that watched the human invaders with thousands of unblinking eyes. This place gives me the creeps, muttered Private Song Kung-ho as his squad moved through a tunnel lined with what looked like giant teeth. Good, replied Sergeant Imuna. Creepy means we are in the right place. Deathworld rule number 1. If it is not trying to kill you, you are probably lost. The swarm had learned to fight humans over the past month, but they still could not predict what the Deathworld soldiers would do next. When they encountered a chamber filled with acid pools, any civilized species would have turned back or used protective equipment. Instead, Captain Yoon Seo-chin ordered his team to use the acid. As a weapon, they captured it in containers and began using it to dissolve through the ship's internal structures, creating their own passages directly toward the center. The bugs built this place to keep invaders out, Yoon Seo-gin explained to the horrified alien observer who had insisted on documenting the mission, but they never considered invaders who would redecorate with explosives and stolen acid. Deep in the ship's core, Dr. Hans Sora had made a discovery that changed everything. The Queen Mother was not just the leader of the swarm, she was dying. At these readings, she reported to General Kang Min-ho over the CUM system. The Queen Mother is starving to death. The swarm's constant expansion is not aggression. It is desperation. Explain, Kang. Min-ho ordered. The swarm reproduces too, fast for its food supply. They have to keep consuming new worlds or their own population growth will kill them. They are trapped in a cycle they cannot break. This information reached Colonel Kim Tae-yeon just as his forces broke through into the Queen Mother's chamber. What he found there was not the monster he had expected. The Queen Mother was massive, easily the size of a building, but she was also clearly suffering. Her biological armor was cracked and dull. Her movements were slow and pained. Around her, thousands of smaller Korthok creatures tended to her needs with obvious devotion. You have come to kill me, the Queen Mother said through the translation system. Her voice carried centuries of weariness. Good. Perhaps then my children can finally rest. Kim Tae-yeon lowered his weapon. Around him, his Marines kept their guns ready, but did not fire. Something about the scene felt wrong for a final battle. We came to stop the destruction of innocent. Worlds, Kim Taeyeon said carefully. But maybe there is another way. There is no other way, the Queen Mother replied. We consume or we die. We grow or we starve. It is what we are. What if we could change what you are? Kim Taeyeon asked. The question created a silence that seemed to fill the entire chamber. The Queen Mother's massive head turned to study the human more carefully. You are from the Death World, she said finally, the place that kills its children to make them strong. Earth does not kill us, Kim Taeyeon corrected. Earth teaches us to survive. And survivors always find solutions that others miss. What happened next would be debated by xenobiologists for generations. Instead of fighting, Kim Taeyeon sat down on the organic floor and began to explain human history to an alien queen. He told her about the ice ages that nearly destroyed humanity, about the plagues that killed millions, about wars that seemed impossible to survive, about how humans had learned to turn every disaster into an opportunity to become something better. Your people consume because you must grow, he said. But growth does not have to mean expansion. It can mean evolution. Meanwhile, throughout the ship, Third Human forces were implementing a plan that only a Deathworld species would have considered. Instead of destroying the brood mother, they were performing surgery on it. Master Sergeant Koei Sunmi led teams that carefully placed explosives, not to kill the ship, but to remove specific organs. Dr. Han Sora guided them to biological systems that controlled reproduction and hunger. We are not killing the patient, Koesumi explained to the alien observers. We are giving it a lobotomy. Deathworld medicine at its finest. The breakthrough came when Private Song Kyung-ho suggested something that made everyone stop and stare. What? If we taught them to sing, he asked. The idea seemed insane, but then most human ideas seemed insane to civilized species. Song Kyung-ho had discovered that human music disrupted the swarm's hive mind. But what if, instead of using it as a weapon, they used it as medicine? Dr. Han Sora began working with captured Korthok specimens, teaching them simple melodies. Results were extraordinary. Individual creatures began showing signs of independent thought. The hive-mind connection weakened, but instead of causing chaos, it created something new, choice. For the first time in their species' history, individual Korthok creatures could decide for themselves what they wanted to do. Back in the Queen Mother's chamber, Kim Taeyeon made an offer that shocked everyone, including his own forces. Stop consuming other worlds, he said, and we will help you find another way to survive. Why would you help us? The Queen Mother asked. We have destroyed billions of lives. Because Kim Taeyeon replied, that is what Deathworld survivors. Do we help others survive too? The negotiation that followed lasted 18 hours. In the end, the agreement was simple. The swarm would stop its expansion and allow human scientists to study their biology. In return, humanity would help them develop sustainable population control and alternative food sources. But the real breakthrough came when the Queen Mother made a choice that amazed everyone. She decided to divide herself, using abilities that the swarm had never employed before. The Queen Mother split her consciousness into hundreds of smaller queen entities. Each one would control a much smaller population that could survive without consuming entire worlds. You taught us that evolution does not require destruction, she explained to the assembled humans and aliens. You showed us that growth can mean becoming better, not just bigger. 6 months later, the first joint human Korthok colony was established on a previously uninhabited world. The reform swarm worked alongside human engineers to build cities that grew instead of consuming. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to address what had happened. High Counselor Asmith stood before the assembly with a report that would change galactic civilization forever. We asked the humans to send warriors, he announced. They sent something far more dangerous. They sent teachers. He gestured to the display showing the thriving human Korthok colonies. They did not just defeat our enemy. They transformed our enemy into our ally. They took a force of pure destruction and taught it to create. Ambassador Velthara of the Villani stood to address the council. Her crystalline form now glowed with health and hope instead of fear. The humans saved 3 billion of my people, she said. But more than that, They saved the Korthok as well. They showed us that even the most hopeless situation can be transformed, if you approach it with the right perspective. Dr. Han Sora, now serving as Earth's first galactic medical advisor, had the final word. She stood before representatives of 47 species and delivered a message that would echo through history. "You called us Deathworlders," she said. "You thought that meant we were good at killing? But Deathworld does not teach you to destroy. It teaches you to survive. And the highest form of survival is helping others survive too." She gestured to the mixed crews of humans, Korthok, and other species working together on the colony ships. "We do not just survive the darkness," she continued. "We bring light to others who are trapped in it. That is what Deathworld really means. That is what humanity really is." The war was over. But more than that, the galaxy had learned something new about what it meant to be truly civilized. It was not about having the most advanced technology or the most elegant solutions. It was about never giving up on the possibility that every problem had a solution. Every enemy could become a friend, and every ending could become a new beginning. The humans had not just saved the Villani, they had saved everyone, including their enemies. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly human. The end.